I'm Kenyette Tisha Barnes. I'm here talking about Project 2025. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. I got my little baby Mike. She is pink. She is cute. And she seems to work better if I hold her in my hand. So we just took the lanyard clip off of it. She likes to be in my hand. That's all cool. She wants to be in front of the camera as well. So here she is. So this will be baby Mike. We're going to call her Sasha. So this is Sasha the mic. She's going to be the medium by which we spit this. So first we got our notes right here, Project 2025. Unfortunately, we had to kill a couple of trees to get all of that stuff printed out. All 900 and blah, blah, blah pages of it. Yes, I read it. So you don't have to. Next, I have my cup of coffee. Shout out to Lola. Because we're going to be caffeinated, because we're going to need to be caffeinated, because this is a lot. And finally, we're going to just kind of go through this beat by beat, piece by piece, giving you guys what you can use for this. Because at the end of the day, who wants to read this? Who wants to read this? Nobody wants to read this. Nobody wants to read this. But it's important because this is the conservative mandate at the moment. And although the GOP candidate, whose name I shall not say, has sort of distanced himself from this, the reality is that this is the conservative mandate, and the Heritage Foundation has an extremely large voting bloc. So we're going to get into it. So who is the Heritage Foundation? Who are these people? Do you know them? Are they my neighbors? Do they live on the next block? I think they may. But let's kind of dive in here. According to Wikipedia, because you know we all like Wikipedia, the Heritage Foundation has had significant influence in U.S. public policy making and has historically been ranked among the most influential public policy organizations in the United States. Furthermore, the Heritage Foundation was founded on February 16th, 1973. I think that was like 4 days before my little brother was born. Yeah, wow, that's interesting. And it was founded during the Nixon administration. Growing out of a new business activist movement inspired by the Powell Memorandum, discontent with Richard Nixon's embrace of the liberal consensus, and the neo-parliamental cautious nature of existing think tanks. Okay, first of all, who wrote this? Who the hell wrote this? Who wrote this? This is reading like a political science class, like 400 level. Like, why are we, like, what is this? Tell us who we are. Okay, so let's just skim through. So basically, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank. It is a public policy think tank. They are listed as a 501c3 organization, so they are nonprofit. And since the 70s, like over 50 years, their entire shtick has been, we need to go back to the way it used to be. We need a more conservative agenda because the liberals are messing us up. So let's find out what the liberals are doing. As you read through Project 2025, with or without coffee or wine, of which I do endorse if you are over 21 and an adult, you will find very quickly what this is and what it is not. So what it is literally a strategic plan. It is one organization and one organization's ideas for what they believe is best for the United States. So let's talk about what happens when you have these sort of ideologues making public policy. Well, let's start with things like Jim Crow laws. Remember how Jim Crow laws? It was a couple people. Sasha wants you all to hear me when I say this, that Jim Crow laws were a few people who thought that was best for the United States. Thank you, Sasha. We also have a history of ideological policy making. Remember abstinence only into marriage, people? How's that going? That's petty. I'm sorry. Come on, Sasha. If you're going to be with me, you're going to have to act right. So we do have a history of ideological policymaking. And what happens with ideological policymaking is that ideology becomes infused with public policy. and public policy becomes infused with what is best for the citizenry. That means all of us. And when we start saying that ideology is best for everyone, what could possibly go wrong? And the one thing I want to do in this segment is really talk a little bit about who developed this. Like, who sat down and got carpal tunnels writing this out? So here's something that I found out. 43% of the contributors of Project 2025 have a direct affiliation with the Heritage Foundation. And I know Sasha wants us to repeat that, so I'm going to just repeat it again. 43% of the contributors for Project 2025 have a direct affiliation with the Heritage Foundation. Why is that important? Because it's less about a conservative mandate of a unified front and more about one organization leading the conversation. It's given HOA. It's given the entire family works for the HOA. It is given, this is what's best for me, so I'm going to say it's best for everyone, and I'll bring in 4 or 5 different people to agree with me. As we read down this and we look at the contributors to the Heritage Foundation, you will begin to see a trend. Many of these people have a direct affiliation with this organization. 43% of the people who contributed to this are literally living in the crash pad of the Heritage Foundation. So now that we know that 43% of the contributors to this have a direct affiliation with the Heritage Foundation, how many other contributors were there? 53. 53. So 43% went to the Heritage Foundation, and the other 47%, or 57%, I can't count today, 57%, were peppered among 53 organizations. Yeah, that's not even 1% per organization. So when we talk about coalition work, and as someone who's done coalition work, it is very important that there is equitable distribution of influence in order for something to be a coalition. Equitable distribution of influence. That means people who can vote, people who can make policy, people who can write bylaws, people who can veto things. And one of the things that happened a lot in here is that the writers were very clear to say, we didn't all agree, of course, because if you're the one making all the rules, who's going to always agree with you? So what I really want us to be super clear about as we begin to dive into this, because child, this is going to be a swan dive. So get on your Speedos because we're going to dive deep. Okay. Before we dive into this, we have to be aware 43% of the contributors come from one organization, and the remaining are 53 organizations. That's not a coalition. That's not equitable. I want to reflect on something that was told to me when I was a graduate student at George Washington University. And it has to do with just overwhelming people with information, right? If you want people to just check out, if you want to be able to slide things into documents, make it 100,000 pages. Just make it 100,000 pages. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a dissertation. It could be a book. It can be a court order. You make it lengthy. And then your hope is that the person becomes so overwhelmed by it that they just stop reading. I read everything. I'm probably on my 7th prescription because I read everything. I just went and bought new readers with the blue light filter. I remember when my reader strength was like 150. It is not 150 anymore, and I'm feeling some kind of way about that. I digress. But why am I telling you that story? Because it's important to understand as we begin to talk about Project 2025 is that it is intentionally dense. It is intentionally arcane language. It is intentional to be overwhelming because it was never meant to be read, analyzed, especially in any kind of a forensic way. They just wanted it all in there. This is literally, no disrespect to my loves in New Orleans, this is political gumbo. Throw everything in there and bet that people don't read it. What I want to talk about now is the 4 pillars of Project 2025, because there are 4 pillars, cuatro pillars of this amazing, I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to just call it amazing something, right? It's something. It is something. And as I read through this, there's something about Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And once again, when we talk about lengthy documents, you got to put words in there to make up the page count. So Project 2025 is more than 50 and growing of the nation's leading conservative organizations joining forces to prepare and seize the day. No, 43% are affiliated with the Heritage Foundation, and of the remaining 53 organizations, their influence is peppered among 57%. Why is that important, and why do we keep saying that? Because it's important when you talk about coalition work. It's coalition work, but it's not. Let's keep going. The axiom goes, personnel is policy. Yes, we know. We know. So is ideology. Personnel is usually ideology. Ideology is policy. And what we also know is that ideology cloaked as policy is dangerous. This book is fundamentally an invitation for you, the reader, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Miss Smith. My name is Barnes, but okay. To come to Washington or support those who can. Okay, what is this? What are we talking about here? Is this coalition building? Are we building a coalition? Sasha, help me out here. I don't know what's happening. Sasha, what's happening? They're telling on themselves. They're telling everyone the truth. This is not a coalition. This is one organization attempting to make ideology policy. Yeah. The 4 pillars of Project 2025. And why are they important? Because I guess the Heritage Foundation wants them to be important. So, Pillar 1. This volume puts in one place a conservative view of how major federal agencies must be governed, and where disagreements exist, brackets out those differences for the next president to choose a path. What? Stay with me, please. Okay. We're gonna, the TA is going to tutor you guys in these. Pillar 2, a personnel database that allows candidates to build their own professional profiles and our coalition members to review and voice their recommendations. These recommendations will then be collated and shared with the president-elect's team, greatly streamlining the appointment process. Okay, so that, I believe, has more to do with the Project F employees, and we're going to talk about the Project F employees, okay, later in the conversation. Again. Pillar 3, the Presidential Administration Academy. Lord, didn't we try this once before and it didn't work? The Presidential Administration Academy, an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition. Pillar 4, the playbook. We are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterance of "So help me God." Y'all, I'm not making this shit up. It's right here. It's in black and white. All right? Not making it up. So now that we have gotten through the 4 pillars of Project 2025, we talked a little bit about the fact that 43% of these contributors are literally living in the basement of the Heritage Foundation, and that the sheer number of pages of this is intended to just be so overwhelming that you just don't want to read it. We're going to jump right into A Promise to America. So A Promise to America is the foreword of Project 2025. I'm not going to read it word for word because I'm not. It is written by Dr. Kevin Roberts. Dr. Kevin Roberts is a well-known political strategist, conservative political strategist. So let's just dive on in. 44 years ago, the United States and the conservative movement were in dire straits. I don't remember that, but I guess because it was in the middle of the Reagan administration and, Roe v. Wade happened and, women had access to contraception and, minorities actually had a right to work and affirmative action happened. Worse still, at that moment of acute vulnerability and division, we found ourselves besieged by existential adversaries, foreign and domestic. That was also the fall of the Soviet Union. So I'm not sure. The Cold War was pretty much over by then, but we're going to keep going. Contemporary elites have been repurposed the worst ingredients of 1970s. Hold that thought. So let's talk about this. Contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of the 1970s. So remember what was going on in the 1970s, right? Roe versus Wade, the civil rights movement. People were actually saying, hey, can you not sick dogs on us? Let's get back to reading. Contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of the 70s radical chic. I didn't realize that we were radical chic. I'm a baby of the 70s, so I'm gonna own that radical chic. To build the totalitarian cult. The one thing about this is that language is very important. And at some point, we're going to really get into linguistics and why linguistics is important. One of my best theorists that I love is George Lakoff. And he is literally the king of legislative linguistics, and we're going to really channel him a little bit in this conversation. But be very careful about the language used in this. The radical chic to build the totalitarian cult known, that's a lot of syllables, known as the Great Awakening. Who says that? The Great Awakening? The Great Awakening. The Great Awakening. I'm going to just let that sit there for a second. The Great Awakening is what we are attempting to protect ourselves from.